There are women who, once they reach a certain age, become like shattered mirrors, fragments of all they've given, reflections of who they once were, yet invisible to those who should see them most clearly. And still, they stand. They still feel. They still long to be treated with the dignity they deserve. The truth is uncomfortable. If you don't claim your place, others will decide who you are and what you're worth. And at this stage, every minute counts. You can't afford to keep giving away your voice, your body, or your peace. Today, I want to share 9 powerful keys that can transform not just how you see yourself, but how the world sees you. These aren't empty tips or pretty phrases, they're acts of power. And the last key, that one might be the difference between living in fear or living with respect. I'm Gabriel, and if you're here, it's because something inside you refuses to fade away. Stay until the end. Your strength deserves to be seen, and this might be the guide you needed to remember that. Have you ever felt like you gave your best for years, and still, it wasn't enough to be seen with respect? Not by your children, not by your partner, not by society. As if all that love, all that effort, all those sacrifices had been stored away in an old box, forgotten by the very people who should remember them most. That feeling of having done everything right and still waiting for recognition is more common than you think. And it's not about pride or nostalgia, it's something much deeper. The right to know who you are without relying on anyone else's validation. You're now listening to the first step on this journey. Redefine your worth beyond external expectations. And I don't say that as a decorative phrase, but as a vital need. Because as long as you keep looking outside for something that can only be recovered from within, you'll keep handing over your power to those who don't know how or don't want to hold it with respect. Many expect you to become more docile, quieter, more grateful, even for the little you're given as you age. But the truth is different. When you reach this point in life, what you need most is not to please, but to understand. Understand that you weren't born to carry the whole world on your shoulders. Understand that if you keep judging yourself by the same standards you've been measured by for years, the mother who never complains, the woman who's always there for everyone, the grandmother who endures in silence, you'll never truly find yourself. Picture for a moment that you're standing in front of an altar, not a religious one, but a symbolic altar. On it are all the names you've carried: mother, wife, worker, caregiver, daughter. Each of those roles is represented by a lit candle. Some still burn brightly, others are flickering, barely holding on. And in the middle of that altar there's an empty space, waiting for a candle you never lit, your own name. Not the one you were given at birth, but the one that represents the woman you truly are when no one is asking anything of you. That candle is there, waiting for you to have the courage to light it yourself, because no one else will. The Stoics spoke of the importance of knowing one's own nature. Marcus Aurelius said, "What is not good for the beehive is not good for the bee." But what if you've spent your whole life caring for the hive without ever asking if you were okay yourself? That contradiction, that forgetting of your own needs, is what's eroded your self-worth. Because respect isn't demanded from a place of emptiness, it's built from self-recognition. And if you don't give yourself that place, others will keep deciding who you're allowed to be. Redefining your worth doesn't mean rejecting everything you've done. It means letting go of the need to keep carrying expectations that no longer reflect who you are. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. What you need is to look at yourself without judgment, without guilt, without the weight of years spent trying to be enough. Because you already were. And now it's time to be something else. A free woman, a dignified woman, a woman fully aware of what she will never again negotiate. This is the beginning, the first step, and without it, none of the others matter. Because as long as you're waiting for permission to be yourself, you'll keep postponing the life you truly deserve. If in the first point we talked about the need to reclaim your worth without depending on others, now it's time to address the second problem that's ruining the lives of many people at this stage: the inability to set boundaries without carrying guilt. The title says it all: Master the Art of Emotional Boundaries. Because it's one thing to say you want peace and respect, and another thing entirely to have the courage to build them, even if it means disappointing the people you love most. Many people confuse love with total availability. They believe loving means always being there, saying yes, even when your body needs rest, when your soul is screaming no. But here's a truth few dare to say out loud. Love without boundaries becomes silent sacrifice, and that sacrifice, over time, turns into resentment, not toward others, but toward yourself. How many times have you felt that mix of anger and sadness after doing something for someone simply because you couldn't say no? How many times have you felt like your adult children, your siblings, your neighbors have gotten used to you always being available, as if your time didn't have the same value as theirs? The Stoics spoke about the difference between what's in our control and what isn't. Epictetus said it bluntly: freedom is achieved when we stop trying to control what doesn't belong to us. And one of the most subtle forms of control is believing that to avoid losing someone's affection, you must constantly give in. But that's not love. That's fear. Fear of being alone, of being seen as selfish, of breaking an image you helped create. Because yes, many times we've been complicit in our own invisibility. In practice, this shows up in ways that are small but deeply damaging. They call you to watch the grandkids even when you're sick. You accept visits at odd hours because how could you say no? You lend money you don't really have. You listen to everyone's problems without anyone asking how you're doing. And worst of all, you silence your own needs because you believe they're not as important as everyone else's. Little by little, your world shrinks down to serving. And serving without balance eventually erases you. From a spiritual perspective, setting boundaries is not rejecting others. It's recognizing that you, too, are a child of God, of the universe, of life. And that means you deserve care, rest, and respect. It's a sacred act. Jesus withdrew alone to pray. The desert sages lived in silence, far from the noise, to care for their souls. They didn't do it out of contempt, but out of a need for clarity. You have that right too. And if you don't claim it, no one's going to offer it to you. Mastering the art of boundaries isn't something that happens overnight. It's a daily practice that begins with one simple question. Am I doing this out of love or out of fear? If the answer is fear, then you need to pause. Because true love, even maternal love, doesn't demand that you erase yourself. On the contrary, it flourishes where there is mutual respect. And if there's no respect, then it's time to speak up, or at least to begin stepping back. It hurts at first. It hurts to see how the people who are used to your unconditional giving react. It hurts to hear their complaints, their silence, their offense disguised as distance. But that pain is the price of your liberation. It's not a punishment. It's a sign that you're rebuilding. Like when a wound starts to heal and it stings, it means your body is doing the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable. We've reached this second point because without boundaries, there is no respect. And without respect, there is no peace. You're not here to keep enduring. You're here to start choosing. And choosing also means saying no. No to what drains you. No to what no longer represents you. No to what demands more than it gives. Because in that, no begins your real yes to yourself, to your life, to your dignity. After understanding that your self-worth can't depend on others and that setting boundaries is a vital need, not an act of selfishness, we've come to the third point in this video. And this is where things begin to shift. Learn to say no without fear of being alone. Because even though we know it's right to take care of ourselves, many women don't dare to do it for one simple reason: the fear of being alone. And that fear is no small thing. It's a shadow that follows many women in this stage of life. Women who, after giving so much, feel that if they start putting themselves first, they'll lose the few connections they still have. But here's a truth you may not want to hear, though you need to. An honest solitude is better than company built on obligation and exhaustion. Saying no doesn't mean rejecting others, it means rescuing yourself. When you say no from a grounded place, without aggression, but with clarity, you're saying, I'm here, I hear myself, I respect myself. And that has an immediate effect on your soul. The strategy I want to share with you is simple on the surface, but powerful in its impact. Every time someone asks something of you, take a breath, pause for at least 3 seconds, and silently ask yourself, does this bring me closer to peace or take me further from it? If the answer is that it takes you further, then you have every right to say no. You don't need to over-explain, you don't need to make up elaborate excuses. A not today, or I need some time for myself is more than enough. Stoicism teaches us to act with reason, not impulse. To choose from a place of calm. Seneca said, "He who fears solitude has not yet learned to be his own companion." And this is where spirituality naturally enters. Because you are not alone. Maybe the people who used to be around you are gone, or they're present in a superficial way. But your soul is still there. God, life, or whatever you choose to call it, is still speaking to you. The problem is, you can't hear it if you're always busy pleasing others. That silence you fear so much may actually be the sacred space where you finally reconnect with yourself. Picture a woman who, for the first time in years, decides not to attend a family gathering where she knows she'll be treated as always, with demands, with judgment, with indifference. She stays home, makes herself a cup of tea, sits down to read a book she's been putting off. At first, she feels guilty, but then something shifts. The silence no longer hurts. She starts to feel free, not empty. And the next day, when she sees her family again, she realizes something has changed in her. She's no longer willing to accept just any kind of treatment. That one simple decision to say no just once became the seed of her transformation. If this message is resonating with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. I'd love to know which country you're listening from, and if you feel like it, leave a comment with the phrase, "My time matters too." Because when you start saying no without fear, you don't just respect yourself more, others start to see you differently too. And this is just the beginning. There are still deep lessons ahead that can help you rebuild your life with more clarity. And the last one, that one could completely change the way you walk through this world. Stay with me. We need to talk about the things no one else dares to say. Saying no without guilt is a quiet but powerful victory. However, that victory can't hold if it doesn't rest on a philosophical and spiritual foundation that gives it meaning. Because you can set boundaries, you can prioritize yourself, but if you don't understand why you're doing it, doubt and guilt will find their way back in. That's why we've reached the 4th point in this video, and this one might be the most underestimated of all. Stoic wisdom as a tool for inner peace. And this is where many people stumble without even realizing it. The common, almost invisible mistake is thinking that philosophy no longer matters at a certain age, that those ideas are only for young idealists or disconnected intellectuals. Thinking that after 60 or 70, there's no point in sitting down to read Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus. That there's no use trying to understand something so ancient when the urgent issues are health, money, relationships. But that's a mental trap and one of the most dangerous. Because when you give up the inner search, you also give up understanding why you feel what you feel and how you can transform it. You're unknowingly giving up having a framework that supports you in difficult times. Philosophy isn't some abstract idea. It's a flashlight. In a world that often feels dark, uncertain and noisy, that flashlight helps you see clearly what once felt confusing. Stoicism, in particular, carries the strength of the essential. It doesn't ask you to believe in magic or to repeat empty mantras. It asks you to observe, to think, to distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot. And that distinction, when truly understood, is liberating. But this trap creeps in gently. It comes in the form of phrases like, "That's just how I am." "At my age, what's the point? Those things aren't for me." And when those phrases are repeated often enough, they build an invisible cage. You keep on living, yes, but without direction. You react to life, but you're no longer choosing from your center. And that's a kind of surrender that doesn't show on the outside, but inside, it slowly dims your light. The consequences run deep. When you don't have a clear philosophy of life, any emotion can knock you down. If someone hurts you, you react impulsively. If something goes wrong, you're overwhelmed by anger or sadness. If someone pulls away, you feel like your world is spinning out of control. And the worst part is, you start depending more and more on what happens outside to feel okay inside. But when you practice Stoic wisdom, everything changes, because suddenly you realize the world can stay chaotic and you can still remain calm, that others can act however they want, and you still get to choose how to respond. That's true serenity, not the absence of conflict, but the inner strength not to be destroyed by it. You don't need to read ancient texts or memorize Latin quotes. It's enough to grasp one simple but powerful idea: there are things within your control and things that aren't. If something is outside your control, what others think, the passing of time, your children's attitudes, it doesn't deserve your energy. But if it's in your hands, how you react, how you think, what you choose, then that's where you need to act with purpose. Spirituality grows stronger with this perspective because it frees you from unnecessary guilt and lets you connect with the sacred from a place of peace. Not from the need for everything to be perfect, but from a deep acceptance that even if you can't change everything, you can still live with purpose, with clarity, with self-respect. There's no age limit for that. It's never too late to think differently, feel differently, live differently. This fourth point isn't decorative. It's the silent foundation of everything else. Because without that inner wisdom, without that steady compass, any wind can knock you down. But when you know who you are and where you're choosing to live from, even the harshest storm becomes part of your path. And that's the kind of serenity that's no longer up for negotiation, because it doesn't come from the outside. It rises from the deepest part of you. If Stoic wisdom gives us the inner clarity to make firm decisions, there's one dimension that's often overlooked, yet it deeply shapes how we experience this stage of life. Turn your body into an ally of your mind. This is the fifth point in our journey, and if we don't approach it with honesty, everything else risks falling apart. Because a clear mind needs a body that supports it, not one that sabotages it. And too often, what begins as physical fatigue turns into a silent surrender that drags down your will, your self-esteem, and your hope. The consequences of ignoring the body aren't just physical. Yes, there's pain, there's stiffness, there are the aches that pile up. But there's something worse. The feeling that your body no longer belongs to you, that it's become an obstacle, a burden, an excuse not to go out, not to move, not to try. When that thought takes root, it starts a dangerous chain reaction. You isolate yourself, you lose initiative, and little by little, others begin deciding for you what you can do, what you can't, what you need. You stop being the protagonist of your life and become someone who needs to be looked after, even if no one asks if that's what you really want. That dependence doesn't happen overnight. It builds every time you choose not to listen to yourself, not to move, not to respond to the signals your own body is giving you. This isn't about denying limitations. We all have them. Time leaves its marks, and that's natural. But giving up too soon isn't a consequence of aging. It's a result of disconnection. And here's an uncomfortable truth. If you treat your body like an enemy, you'll experience it as a prison. But if you treat it as a worthy companion, even in its fragility, you'll be able to do things with it you can't even imagine today. Not out of a fantasy to look young, but from the deep decision to keep inhabiting yourself with respect. Turning this around doesn't require magic formulas, but it does demand a different mindset. One that stops seeing the body with disdain or resignation and starts seeing it with commitment. Your body is the home of your will. It's the bridge between what you dream and what you do. Taking care of it isn't about appearance or superficial discipline, it's an act of loyalty to yourself. And that loyalty is practiced every day. When you choose to walk, even just a little, when you rest without guilt, when you choose food that nourishes instead of punishes, when you touch your skin without hatred, without shame, without sadness. It's not a fast path, but it's a possible one, and it's worth it. Adopting this new perspective won't erase the pain, but it will give it new meaning. Because instead of experiencing every ache as a sentence, you can start to see it as a reminder. You're still here, still alive, still the owner of your body. Even if others have tried to make you believe it no longer matters. Every act of care, no matter how small, is a stand against abandonment. And that daily act is what can restore not just the respect of others, but something even more precious, self-respect. Because no one fully respects themselves while despising the place they live in. And you deserve to live in yourself with dignity, no excuses, no shame, no fear. If your body is the territory where dignity can still be rebuilt, then your gaze, your attitude, your way of moving through the world is what determines whether that body is at war or at peace. But that peace, even if you manage to find it physically, means little if, on the inside, you still feel small, silenced, invisible. That's why the sixth point in this video touches on a wound many women keep hidden beneath years of unrewarded effort. Become a high-value woman. And we're not talking about trendy phrases or empty words. We're talking about walking through life with your head held high, not because others recognize your worth, but because you no longer allow yourself to look down. Pause for a moment and picture this. It's the end of yet another week. You've done what was expected of you. You listened to everyone else's problems. You cooked for people who didn't say thank you. You stayed up late waiting for a call that never came. And now, as night falls, you sit in front of the mirror. But you don't see yourself. You don't know who's looking back. There's no spark, no excitement, just a mix of exhaustion and resignation. That image, repeated over the years, isn't the result of aging. It's the result of forgetting your worth, of letting others define you, of being useful to everyone but yourself. And that, sooner or later, breaks something inside. A high-value woman isn't someone who has it all figured out. She's someone who knows her time is sacred, that her words carry weight, that her presence isn't meant to fill someone else's emptiness, but to honor her own existence. And here comes a phrase that might sting, but you need to hear it. If you don't value yourself, others will treat you like a bargain. If you don't put yourself first in your own internal ranking, you'll always be last in everyone else's. That's the truth. And as long as you keep waiting for someone else to return the self-worth you've lost, you'll stay stuck in the same scene, waiting, giving in, explaining. Until one day, you realize there's no time left for you. There is a way out, but it's not easy, because it's not about changing your surroundings. It's an internal decision. It's waking up one day and saying to yourself, "This ends here. No more explaining, No more justifying, no more sacrificing for no reason, no more giving what I don't have. From now on, everything I do will come from my center, not from a fear of being left behind. And yes, it might be hard at first. Some people will drift away. Some will judge you. They'll say you've changed. But that's not the end. It's the beginning of a life where you stop begging for attention and start living with intention. You didn't come into this world to be a background character in someone else's story. You came to build your own. And even if you think it's too late, it's not. Because as long as you're breathing, you can still turn the light back on. Becoming a high-value woman isn't a destination. It's a daily practice. It's how you choose to speak to yourself, how you decide what you'll accept, how you dare to look at yourself again and truly see yourself. Because if you don't recognize your worth, no one else will, and you deserve more than a life in silence. You deserve a life that knows you're alive. And that starts today, right here, with a decision that doesn't need anyone's permission, just courage. If you've made it this far, it's because there's a force inside you that hasn't been extinguished. A force that, despite the exhaustion, the disappointments, and the silence of others, keeps pushing from deep within with one clear purpose: to reclaim your place. What we talked about in the last chapter was clear. It's not enough to want respect. You have to become a woman who embodies it. A high-value woman doesn't settle, doesn't beg, doesn't wait. And once that sense of worth awakens, it forces you to see your life through new eyes. That's why we've reached the seventh and final point in this journey. Live your purpose with freedom, without regret. Because nothing you've heard so far will matter if you keep postponing the life you know deep down you're still meant to live. This isn't about motivation, it's about awareness. Time doesn't stretch like it used to, you know that. Each year feels heavier, each day without direction becomes a silent wound. So here's the uncomfortable question you can't avoid. How much longer are you going to wait? How many more decisions will you keep putting off? How many excuses will you keep giving yourself to justify a life lived halfway? Because every time you say, "I'm too old for that," you're surrendering your future to resignation. And resignation never comes alone. It brings guilt, frustration, and a bitterness that settles into your eyes, your shoulders, your soul. Living with purpose doesn't mean changing everything overnight. It means waking up each morning with a clear intention, even a small one. It means asking yourself what action, what word, what choice brings you closer to the life you want. And above all, it means stopping the habit of looking back with regret. What you didn't do, what was denied to you, what you lost, you can't change that. But what lies ahead is still yours to live. With strength, with dignity, with presence. Because regret isn't a sentence, it's a signal. And if you know how to read it, it can lead you to the freedom you've been postponing for years. Transformation doesn't happen by magic. It comes when you decide to stop placing yourself in the role of the victim. When you stop waiting for others to change, for the conditions to improve, for your body to go back to what it once was. Life isn't going to adapt to you. You are the one who must take control with what you have, with what's left, with what still burns inside. If you don't take that responsibility, nothing changes, and you'll keep watching the days pass by like someone's staring through a window they don't dare to open. This is the moment to close the circle, to gather everything you've heard, everything you've felt along this journey, and make yourself a promise: never give up again. Because every day you choose from your center, every act of self-respect, every boundary you set, every decision that comes from your purpose is a declaration that your life still matters. You're not here to simply survive until the light goes out. You're here to live what can still be lived with a freedom that's no longer negotiable and a clarity no one else can give you. That decision can only be yours. And only you will know, when you look in the mirror again, whether you chose to live without regrets or kept waiting for permission that was never coming. Purpose means nothing if it doesn't translate into real decisions. You can have the noblest intentions, the clearest vision, even a list of everything you want to change, but if you don't take action, it all turns into a comfortable illusion. That's what we saw in the previous chapter. The difference between waiting and deciding. And now we arrive at the 8th point on this journey, where the abstract becomes concrete. Redefine your routine as an act of self-respect. Because, as long as you keep repeating the same habits that drain you, it doesn't matter how much you reflect, how much you understand, how much you long for change, you'll stay exactly where you are. One concrete action. That's the key. You don't need to write a life plan or make a drastic decision. You just need one firm choice, today. Ask yourself honestly, what's the first thing you do when you wake up? What's your first thought, your first gesture, your first movement? Do you start your day in silence without intention, as if life were just a chore? Or do you begin with presence, like someone who knows every morning is an act of power? Changing just one thing in your routine can trigger a domino effect. Waking up and saying thank you out loud, sitting in silence before touching your phone, taking a 10-minute walk without excuses, making yourself a cup of tea slowly, reading a single paragraph that grounds you. What matters isn't how much, it's the intention. It's the message you give yourself. My time is not left over, it is sacred, but this decision can't rely on temporary motivation, because motivation fades. What holds this change together is a clear mindset. I don't owe myself respect only when others deny it. I owe it to myself every day, even when no one sees it. Because every act of care is a seed, and every time you choose to repeat a routine that dulls you, you're watering your own neglect. The mindset you need to cultivate is this: I build my worth with what I do every day, not with what others think of me. And that shows up in the everyday, in how you care for your body, how you speak to yourself, how you guard your time, how you choose where to place your energy. This isn't a symbolic shift, it's real. And the difference between living a dragged-out life or a purposeful one starts right here, in what you do when no one's watching, because that's where your identity is defined, in those invisible minutes. Don't expect respect to come from the outside if your own routine treats you like you don't matter. True transformation doesn't need an audience. It just needs your decision. And if that decision is firm, if it's consistent, if it's daily, it can rewrite everything. But no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to hand you a routine that brings your power back. That responsibility is yours alone. And it starts now. No excuses, no delays, no more lost time. Changing your routine isn't easy, because the moment you take a different step, everything around you, including your own mind, starts pulling you back toward what's familiar. That's normal. What's not normal is giving up. What's not acceptable is treating inertia like it's fate. That's why the 9th point in this journey strikes at the hardest core of all. Take full responsibility for your emotional life. Because no habit, no boundary, no sense of purpose will last if you're still waiting for someone else to pull you out of the hole. If you still believe your wounds define you. If you keep using your story as an excuse to repeat patterns that drain you. The most common excuses come in soft-sounding phrases, but they're knives at the throat of your power. That's just not who I am. You can't change at my age. It's just my personality. If I'd had a different life, I'd be different. Sound familiar? They're defense mechanisms. They protect you from the fear of failure, the fear of upsetting others, the fear of ending up alone if you dare to be yourself. But they don't protect you from the real harm, the kind that happens when you let others control your emotions, when your days are filled with internal complaints that never become visible choices, because your emotional life isn't an accident. It's something you build, and if you don't build it yourself, someone else will, and they'll shape it to their needs, not yours. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything you've been through. It means recognizing that from this moment on, you are the one who decides what to do with what's left. No one is going to give you the peace you haven't nurtured. If an adult child hurts you, you decide how much space that pain gets in your day. If your body aches, you decide whether to treat it with anger or with care. If you feel alone, you decide whether that solitude is a punishment or a chance to reclaim your voice. The most dangerous self-deception is believing you have no choice, but you do, you always do. It just requires discomfort. It requires stepping out of the passive role. It requires stopping the search for comfort in places that only offer repetition. At this point, it's not about understanding anymore. It's about doing. Because time doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Respect doesn't arrive when others change. It arrives when you decide you're no longer going to tolerate a half-lived life. And that begins on the inside, in how you name your emotions, in how you choose to respond to what you feel, in how you stop justifying what no longer fits. Taking that responsibility is the most radical act of self-love. It's not easy, but it's the only thing that can give you back control. Because your emotional life at this stage doesn't need more reflection. It needs leadership, and that leadership, as painful as it may be, is the price of freedom. There's no more time to waste waiting for something to change. It's now or never. Getting to this point is no small thing. You've walked a demanding path, uncomfortable at times, filled with truths that hurt before they set you free. Because you didn't come to this channel looking for easy comfort. You came to hear what's so often left unsaid. And at this stage of life, that alone is already a form of rebirth. What you've just heard isn't a recipe for overnight change. It's a confrontation, a serious invitation to look at your life with clarity and decide once and for all whether you're going to keep waiting for respect or build it from within without asking for permission. What comes after this video doesn't depend on what I say or what others do. It depends entirely on you. No one is coming to rescue you from your own excuses. No one is going to live the time you have left for you, and that time, you know it, can't be wasted. Those who've stayed until the end have something many others have lost, the ability to listen without denial, to look within without sugarcoating reality. That's why I want to ask you for something simple, yet symbolic. If this message truly spoke to you, leave a comment with your country and the phrase, "I choose to wake up." That will be the sign that you're ready to hold on to what has already started to stir inside you. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. I'm not here to entertain you or dress life up with pretty words. I'm here to walk with you through the process of reclaiming what's yours, your direction, your respect, your autonomy. Because this community isn't built with followers. It's built with women who are done giving away their peace and their time. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this space where every word has a purpose. Share this video with someone you know needs to hear it, even if they haven't said it out loud, because sometimes a single message can be the beginning of a complete shift. And if you still have questions, gaps, or strength you don't know how to channel, this conversation isn't over. Watch one of the two videos now appearing on the screen. Each one was created to walk with you along the same path, the path of living the life you have left with the dignity you deserve. I'll see you soon. And remember, no one will respect you more than you respect yourself. That's the truth you can no longer ignore.